Hi everyone. We began our week talking about why we have laws in the first place. And we have them to maintain public order and to preserve basic freedoms like our right to privacy, our right to protect our property, our right to move about freely. So those are the reasons, some of the reasons we have laws. As some of you noted in class, if we didn't have laws, we would have chaos. So they are necessary for our survival and to have peace in our country and our communities. We also talked about three important branches of government, both on the federal level and the state level. The legislative branch, which makes laws, including criminal laws. The example of that is Congress in D.C. and here in Sacramento, our own state assembly and state senate. They make our laws here in California. We talked about the executive branch, which on the federal level includes the President of the United States. And on the state levels, it includes the governors of those states. And the law enforcement agencies are in charge of enforcing those laws. And then finally, the judicial branch just determines the guilt or innocence of those charged with violation of the laws, but also the judicial branch interprets laws on our behalf. Another thing I wanted to highlight is of course you can use this PowerPoint to go over additional subjects, but I want to just highlight some things that I want you definitely to remember for purposes of this chapter. We also talk, it's not on the PowerPoint, but we did talk about the difference between, oh, here it is, I'm sorry. We talked about the difference between a crime versus a civil law. Civil law or tort is a civil wrong done to an individual by either another individual or sometimes a corporation. So it's a wrong, but it's a civil wrong. A crime is obviously behavior that has fallen below the standard of conduct that we all are supposed to abide by. And that criminal behavior subjects that person to punishment, to be charged and to go through the process of being tried, and if convicted, to be punished. And that the crime is between not an individual. It's not like it used to be in the old days where people would take the law into their own hands. The crime is between the government and the person who committed the alleged crime. So those are the two differences. The civil action, the tort, is between two individuals or maybe an individual and a corporation. And then the crime, the parties involved, it's seen as a public wrong against society. So that's why you will see many cases that say the people of the county of San Diego versus John Doe. It is a wrong committed against the public. And so that's why the government is in charge of charging that crime and in bringing the person to trial. The other thing I wanted to point out is it's not on the PowerPoint for some reason, even though it's part of our objectives that we want to definitely remember for purposes of this chapter. It's on page 9. The generally recognized goals and purposes of the criminal justice system are to discourage and deter people from committing crimes, to protect society from dangerous and harmful people, and to punish people who have committed crimes, and finally to rehabilitate and reform people who have committed those crimes. I do want you to remember that those are the 4 recognized goals. It's not on the PowerPoint, but I did want you to remember that. So again, that's on page 9 of the textbook. The next thing I want to highlight is we talked about the very important term of police power, and it means that states have general and inherent power to make criminal laws. The federal government may enact criminal laws only where the U.S. Constitution grants such power, but in the 10th Amendment of the Constitution, it indicated specifically that any power not given to Congress belongs to the states, or is left to the states. And so there are many reasons why the states enact laws, and it is to protect not only society, but it's for the health and welfare of society. So there are many reasons to do that. But those powers, that police power is not unlimited. And we're going to talk just a little bit about some of the limitations. First, one of the limitations is that a law enacted by the state cannot violate a person's constitutional rights. So these are just some examples of the constitutional rights that cannot be violated as a result of the state using its police power to enact state laws. Another example of a limitation is that the states and Congress cannot enact a law after the fact. So no state or U.S. Congress can create a new crime and make the law retroactive, so that the result is that conduct that was not illegal before, prior to the new law, is now considered illegal, and therefore it subjects the person to a crime. So an example of this is a person commits a crime, a person engages in perfectly legal behavior on October 1st, but Congress or the state enacts a law that makes that specific behavior illegal and says, we're going to make it effective October 1st. Well, they cannot do that. You cannot make conduct that was not illegal at the time the person engaged in it. You cannot go back in time and say, okay, now that's illegal. And that's specifically laid out in Article 1, Sections 9 and 10 of the Constitution. Another limitation is what's known as the principle of it's no punishment without a law. And I'm going to try and pronounce it. I believe it's noli poene sine lege. No punishment without a law. Another way of looking at that is it's called the principle of legality. That's an easier way to say it. But basically it just means that no one can be lawfully punished for his or her conduct or omission unless that conduct or omission has been clearly made a crime by statutory or common law, or the common law of that jurisdiction. And common law just means law created by a judge based on norms, based on expectations. This is before statutes became the most common way of having crimes on the books. So that is another limitation. This just goes into more detail about it on the principle of legality. There are 2 main points. 1, it prohibits retroactive definition of criminal behavior, and 2, it requires clear statutory definitions of the crimes. And we talked about a little bit about this in class. The substantive criminal law is the law itself defining specific behavior that is prohibited. criminal procedure are simply the rules that have to be followed when a person is going through a criminal proceeding. And that's from the arrest all the way to the trial. The legislature creates laws. It can be considered a felony. That's where punishment is more than 1 year. Misdemeanor is less than 1 year. And this is just an example of the police power at work, where conduct can be regulated either by a criminal offense, by a crime being charged, or by a civil offense, or a traffic ticket, or a parking ticket, where you have to pay a fee. Another limitation is anytime a law is created, it has to assure that it complies with due process requirements under the Fifth Amendment, which are federal law that applies to federal cases, and 14th Amendment, which applies to all the states. So the government is limited in making sure that these criminal laws, the criminal laws that they are seeking to regulate conduct for, that it complies with these requirements. Void for vagueness. A law must be specific and not so vague that a person of ordinary intelligence has to guess at what the law may mean. No one should have to guess at what the law is. It must be written very clearly so that a person of ordinary intelligence will be on notice on what the statute forbids. And then the overbreadth doctrine basically says the law goes way too far. It's so overbroad that it overlaps with conduct that is totally protected, conduct that is totally legal. One example they give in the book is there's a statute on the books that says you cannot interrupt a police officer while he or she is performing their duty. Well, if a person sees that there's a crime being committed, say they see a robbery taking place, they interrupted the police officer, they could be potentially subjected to a crime for interrupting the officer, when clearly that was not the intent of the law. You want to be able to let a police officer know that a crime is taking place. That's what they are charged with doing, and that's what they get paid for. So that's just an example of how a law could go too far. So those are just some of the things I wanted to highlight for you. Another restriction is the Equal Protection Clause, and that just means that under criminal laws, they must have an equal effect on everyone that's subject to them. You cannot say, okay, we're going to only charge men with robbery, not women. You cannot do that. You cannot say we're only going to stop Latinos or African Americans who have their music up too loud, not anyone else that's of another race. So that's just an example. The laws have to be applied equally to everyone. So those are just some of the highlights from this week. Again, you can use this PowerPoint to look at some other topics, but those are the areas I wanted to highlight. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your week, and I'll see you next week. Thank you very much.